Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
You're with us today because you're on a quest for some inner peace.
That's right.
And maybe a little less mental suffering too. Right?
Yep.
Well, we've got a really fascinating book to help us explore that today.
Oh, dear.
It's Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Excellent choice.
I'm actually really excited about this one.
Me too.
Have you read it before?
Oh yeah, many times.
Many times, okay.
Yeah, it's so interesting how...
It's written, I think.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's so cool about it.
Yeah, and how accessible it is, right?
Yeah, it's very accessible.
I mean, he uses this simple language and a really engaging Q&A format, and he really emphasizes applying these concepts to your everyday life.
Absolutely.
So it's not just airy-fairy spiritual stuff.
Yeah,
It's...
that's really meant to be practical.
Yeah, and he's not tied to any one religion.
He pulls wisdom from all sorts of traditions.
Right, exactly.
Which I think is really refreshing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So should we jump right in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so one of the most radical ideas in The Power of Now is that the biggest obstacle to enlightenment,
Isn't some external force out there in the world?
but something much closer to home, our own minds.
It's such a mind-blowing concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, when you think about it, we're so conditioned.
To believe that happiness comes from outside of ourselves.
You know, we chase achievements, relationships, possessions,
Right.
thinking those are the keys to fulfillment. But Tolle is saying, hey, look inside.
Yeah.
The real treasure is right there.
It's like that analogy he uses, right?
Oh, yes.
Of the beggar sitting on a box of gold, but he's so busy
Yes.
searching for scraps that he completely misses
Exactly.
the riches he's already sitting on.
He's got it all,
Yeah.
but he doesn't even realize it.
So how do we start to see that box of gold?
How do we tap into that inner treasure?
Well, that's where the idea of the egoic mind comes in.
Okay.
Tolle describes it as this constant chatterbox in our heads.
Yeah.
Full of judgments, worries, criticisms.
Oh, I know that voice.
It never shuts up, does it?
Never.
And it keeps us trapped in this cycle of suffering.
But why? I mean, we all have negative thoughts sometimes, right?
Sure, we do.
What makes the egoic mind so problematic?
Well, think about it this way. The more we believe that voice,
The more we identify with those thoughts and feelings.
the more power we give it.
Okay.
We start to believe that those thoughts are the truth about who we are.
And what the world is like.
So it's like we create our own reality based on...
These often negative thought patterns
Exactly. And that creates this illusion of separation.
between us and everything else.
Okay, so it's not just that it's annoying.
Right.
It's actually shaping our whole experience of reality
It is.
and creating this feeling of disconnection
Exactly. We feel disconnected from ourselves.
from others, from the present moment.
It's like we're living in a self-made prison of our own thoughts.
Wow, a self-made prison. That's a powerful image.
So we end up stuck in this loop of negativity fear.
And this constant feeling that something is missing.
We keep searching for something outside ourselves to fill the void.
But the real problem is the way our minds are working against us.
So how do we break free?
If our own mind is the problem, how do we escape that?
That's the million-dollar question.
And it's what the rest of the book is all about.
Okay, I'm ready.
Tully's answer is the power of now.
The power of now.
Being fully present and engaged in this moment.
Rather than letting our minds drag us into the past or future.
Being present, okay, that sounds simple enough.
Right.
But with all that mental chatter, isn't it easier said than done?
It definitely takes practice.
But Tully isn't saying you need to empty your mind completely.
Or ignore the past and future altogether.
Okay.
Think of it like this. You're on a road trip.
Okay.
Knowing your destination is helpful.
But if you're constantly obsessing over it,
You'll miss the beauty of the journey itself.
you're right.
You're so focused on getting there.
that you forget to enjoy the ride.
I see the analogy.
So it's about shifting our attention
From that constant stream of thoughts,
to the actual experience of this moment.
right here, right now.
Exactly.
But how do we do that? It feels like trying to grab hold of smoke.
And that's where Tully gets really practical.
Okay, good, because I need some practical tips.
He introduces all sorts of techniques for accessing the now.
One of the most powerful ones is focusing on the inner body.
The inner body, okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Real.
But first, let me ask you, have you ever noticed
That Even when your mind is racing a mile a minute?
Your body is always here in the present moment.
That's true. I guess I've never really thought about it that way.
We tend to identify so strongly with our thoughts.
That we forget we also have this physical being that's always grounded in the now.
So by shifting your attention to the sensations within your body,
Feeling your hands, feet, chest breath,
you move away from that mental chatter.
and connect with the aliveness of the present moment.
So it's about tuning into those subtle sensations we usually ignore,
Yes.
rather than getting swept away by thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. It's like grounding yourself in the physical reality of your being.
Interesting. Could we even try that right now?
Absolutely. I think it would be helpful for our listeners.
To experience this directly.
Okay, so everyone listening, if you're up for it, close your eyes for a moment.
And take a few deep breaths. Notice the air moving in and out of your lungs.
Feel the expansion and contraction of your chest.
Feel your feet on the ground, your hands resting in your lap.
Pay attention to any subtle sensations of tingling warmth or pressure within your body.
Just be present with those sensations.
Without judging or analyzing them, just feel them as they are.
What you're doing is anchoring yourself to a solid foundation,
The physical reality of your being.
which can help you feel more stable and present.
Even when your mind is going haywire.
Wow, that's amazing. Even just a few moments of focusing on my inner body.
Creates this sense of calm and presence. It's like hitting the pause button.
On the mental whirlwind.
And that's just one technique.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. Tolle also talks about focusing on silence or space.
As portals to the narrow.
Okay, this is where it gets a little mind-bending for me.
Silence and space. How do those work as entry points to the present moment?
Well, when you think about silence, it's not just the absence of sound
It's this vast, unmanifested presence.
that surrounds and permeates everything
Okay.
by tuning in to the silence between the sounds.
We can tap into this deeper dimension of reality.
So it's like there's this hidden frequency we can tune into
Yes,
if we can quiet the noise in our minds enough to hear it.
exactly. And then there's space.
We tend to think of objects as solid, separate things.
But Tolle reminds us that even seemingly solid objects
Are mostly empty space at the atomic level.
That's true.
By becoming aware of the space around us,
Then within us,
we can access a spaciousness of pure consciousness.
that transcends the limitations of form.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is.
So we've got the inner body silent space.
All pointing us towards the same thing. Experiencing the present moment more fully. And I think there was one more concept that we were going to talk about a little bit later.
Oh yes, conscious death.
Conscious death.
That one usually gets people's attention.
Yeah, I have a feeling our listeners might have some questions about that.
For sure. But I think it's best if we save that one for later.
Okay. Yeah, let's dive into conscious death in more detail in part 3.
That's good.
But for now, let's move on to how this idea of the power of now can actually transform our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships are where the rubber really meets the road.
I like that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that. Okay, so we've been exploring this idea that our minds can be our biggest obstacle to inner peace,
It's true.
and how the power of now offers a way to escape that mental prison.
Now, I'm curious to see how these ideas apply to something as messy and complicated as relationships,
Yeah, relationships can be tough.
especially when our egos get involved.
That's right.
Tolle says that for true love to flourish, we need to move beyond the ego's need for control and drama.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
The ego thrives on separation and self-preservation, right?
Exactly.
And that can create so much conflict in relationships.
It's like we're constantly trying to protect ourselves,
Be sure we're not getting hurt.
get our needs met,
Yeah, and we end up approaching relationships from a place of lack.
needing the other person to complete us or fill some void within ourselves,
It's like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
expecting someone else to fix what we perceive as broken within ourselves.
And that can lead to all sorts of unhealthy dynamics.
Jealousy, possessiveness, codependency, you name it.
You got it.
It's almost like we're setting ourselves up for failure from the start.
In a way, yes.
So what's the alternative? How do we approach relationships from a healthier perspective?
Tolle suggests that a more radical and ultimately more fulfilling approach.
Is to cultivate complete acceptance of our partner as they are.
Acceptance. I have to admit that sounds a lot easier said than done.
It's definitely a practice.
Especially when there are things about our partner that we find annoying.
Frustrating or even hurtful.
Right, how do we accept those things?
It requires us to let go of our judgments.
Expectations and the need to change the other person.
So instead of seeing our partner through the lens of our own desires and preferences,
We're trying to see them with a kind of open, present awareness,
yes, we're meeting them in the now.
without all the baggage of our past experiences and conditioned beliefs.
And when we do that, when we truly accept our partner for who they are,
A whole new level of intimacy and connection opens up,
that's the beauty of it.
because we're not trying to force them into a mold.
Or project our own needs onto them.
We're creating space for them to be themselves.
And for us to be ourselves without all those layers of judgment and expectations.
It's like taking a deep breath and letting go,
That's like we're finally allowing ourselves to see them.
and be seen for who we truly are.
Exactly.
So how do we cultivate that kind of acceptance, especially in those moments when conflict arises?
Well, that's where the power of non-reaction and non-resistance comes in.
Non-reaction and non-resistance.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds challenging.
It can be, especially when emotions are running high.
Right. It's like that saying, don't believe everything you think.
We have to learn to observe our reactions without being controlled by them.
It's not about suppressing our emotions or pretending everything is okay.
It's about becoming aware of those reactive patterns.
That urge to lash out, blame, or withdraw.
And choosing a more conscious and compassionate response.
So instead of adding fuel to the fire,
We're creating a space for things to cool down.
for understanding to emerge.
You got it.
And that takes a lot of self-awareness.
And a willingness to pause before we react.
It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot.
And allowing ourselves to choose a different path.
It's so different from the typical relationship advice we hear.
It's not about playing games, manipulating.
Or trying to win the argument.
Right. It's not about techniques or strategies.
It's about cultivating presence acceptance,
and a deep sense of inner peace within ourselves.
which then naturally flows outwards into our relationships.
So we change ourselves.
And the relationship transforms as a result.
Precisely.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
like we become the change we want to see in our relationships
And speaking of change, Tolle also talks about forgiveness.
as a key to transforming our relationships.
Forgiveness, that's a powerful word.
But doesn't true forgiveness mean condoning hurtful actions?
No, not at all.
Or pretending they didn't happen?
Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay
It's about releasing ourselves from the grip of resentment.
and reclaiming our own power
Okay, so it's more about shifting our internal state.
than changing the past.
Exactly.
Forgiveness allows us to move forward with a lighter heart.
Creating space for healing and deeper connection to emerge.
It's an act of self-love as much as love for the other person.
Throughout this book, it seems like Tolle consistently brings it back to the power of our own internal state.
Our own level of consciousness as the key to changing our experience of the world.
That's one of the core messages of the book.
He says that our level of consciousness is what creates the world we experience.
So if we're constantly operating from a place of fear, lack, and judgment,
We're going to see those things reflected back to us in our relationship.
our work, even our health.
It's like we're projecting our inner world onto the outer world.
And if we want to change our reality, we have to start by changing our internal state.
It's like that Gandhi quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world."
Exactly. And that brings us to another powerful concept from the book.
Limit situations.
Limit situations. What are those?
These are those difficult, often painful experiences that life throws our way.
Illness, loss, major upheavals,
Things that shake us to our core.
and shatter our illusions about how life should be.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've all experienced those moments, haven't we?
Those times when the rug is pulled out from under us.
And we're forced to confront some hard truths about ourselves and the world.
And while those experiences can be incredibly challenging,
Tolle sees them as potential catalysts for spiritual awakening.
okay, so instead of resisting or denying the pain,
We lean into it, allowing it to crack us open.
and reveal a deeper truth.
It's like those kintsugi bowls, the ones that are repaired with gold.
The cracks aren't seen as flaws, but as part of the bowl's beauty and history.
In the same way, our suffering can become a source of strength and wisdom.
If we allow ourselves to fully experience it and learn from it.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
And it reminds me of something else. Tolle talks about a collective shift in consciousness.
That's happening on the planet.
Yeah.
A movement away from fear and separation.
Towards unity and love.
Yes, and this is where the power of individual transformation comes in.
Okay.
As more and more people awaken to their true nature.
That interconnectedness, that presence beyond the ego.
Their light contributes to the collective awakening.
Creating a ripple effect that can literally change the world.
So it's not just about our own personal enlightenment.
It's about playing our part in a larger evolutionary process.
And the amazing thing is, the more we embody presence and acceptance in our own lives,
The more we radiate that energy outwards.
influencing those around us and contributing to this collective shift.
It's like a chain reaction of awakening.
I'm still wrestling with this idea of surrender.
If we accept things as they are, does that mean we shouldn't try to change things?
To make the world a better place.
That's a great question, and one that Tolle addresses directly.
He clarifies that true surrender isn't about passivity or resignation,
It's about aligning ourselves with the flow of life.
which often brings unexpected positive change.
Okay, so it's about letting go of our rigid ideas about how things should be.
And opening ourselves up to a wider range of possibilities.
Precisely.
So it's not about giving up, but about showing up with more presence and awareness.
And trusting that things will unfold as they need to.
You got it.
But how do we do that when our minds are so good at convincing us?
That we need to control everything.
Tolle points out that our minds are often limited by our past experiences and conditioned beliefs.
We think we know how things should be.
But when we surrender, we open ourselves up to a higher intelligence.
A wisdom that transcends our limited understanding.
It's like we're letting go of the reins.
And allowing something bigger than ourselves to guide the way.
And he even extends this concept of surrender to our relationship with our own minds.
Oh, interesting. What does he say about that?
He doesn't advocate for abandoning the mind altogether.
He acknowledges that it can be a valuable tool when used consciously and creatively.
But the key, he says, is to recognize its limitations.
And use it as a servant rather than a master.
So we're not rejecting the mind.
But we're learning to discern between the thoughts that serve us.
And the ones that keep us trapped in suffering.
Exactly.
And how do we do that?
He suggests that the key to accessing the mind's creative potential
Lies in connecting with the stillness and presence of the now.
So instead of thinking harder,
we're creating space for insights to emerge from a deeper level of awareness.
Exactly. He shares examples of great artists and scientists
who report that their most creative breakthroughs
came during moments of mental quietude.
When they were able to access a realm of intelligence beyond thought.
So it's about cultivating that inner stillness, that receptivity.
That allows us to tap into a wellspring of creativity that's always there.
Waiting to be discovered.
And this brings us back to the transformative power of the power of now.
In every area of our lives, from our inner peace to our relationships.
To our creative expression, it's all about learning to align ourselves with the present moment.
And tap into that source of wisdom and power that lies within.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already.
We have.
We've explored the egoic mind, the power of now.
The transformative potential of relationships.
And even touched on this idea of conscious death.
And yet I still feel like there's so much more to unpack.
Especially around this idea of conscious death.
Yeah, it feels like a big piece of the puzzle that we haven't fully explored yet.
You're absolutely right.
It's a concept that deserves its own dedicated exploration.
And one that can offer incredible insights into the nature of our being.
And the true meaning of surrender.
Well, then let's do that. For everyone listening, join us for part 3.
Where we'll delve into the profound and liberating concept of conscious death.
And explore how it can help us live more fully in the present moment. Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of now. And we're picking up right where we left off.
That's right.
This idea of conscious death.
Yeah, are you ready to dive into that?
I am. I have to admit, it's a little intimidating.
I understand. It's definitely one of the most profound
and perhaps initially intimidating concepts in the book. But I promise as we unpack it, you'll see how liberating it can be.
Okay, good. I need a little reassurance.
So first things first, when Tolle talks about conscious death.
He's not talking about literally dying, right?
Exactly. It's more of a symbolic death.
A letting go of the false self, the ego.
That we've constructed through our thoughts, beliefs, and identifications.
So it's like shedding a skin?
Yes.
Or maybe more accurately, shedding a whole identity.
That we've been carrying around, often unknowingly.
It's a beautiful analogy. Think of it like this.
Imagine you've been wearing a costume your whole life.
So much so that you've forgotten it's even a costume.
Okay.
Conscious death is like taking off that costume.
And finally seeing yourself as you truly are.
Naked and unburdened by all those layers of identification.
We get so attached to our roles, our stories, our achievements.
That we lose sight of the essence of who we are beneath all those things.
And it can be really suffocating.
To be trapped under the weight of all those identities.
So Tolle is suggesting that this process of dying to the ego,
to the false self, is actually essential for experiencing true freedom.
And enlightenment.
It's only when we let go of who we think we are
that we can discover who we truly are.
It's a paradox. By surrendering to this death,
We actually awaken to a deeper, more authentic experience of life.
Exactly. It's like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly
The caterpillar has to completely dissolve its old form.
in order to emerge as this beautiful winged creature capable of flight.
Okay, I love that analogy. It really brings it to life.
So how do we actually practice this conscious death?
Well, Tolle suggests that this process of dying to the ego.
Is something we can experience in every moment.
Wait, really? In every moment?
Yes. Not just at the end of our lives.
Each moment presents an opportunity to let go of the past.
To release our grip on the future.
And to simply be present in the now.
So it's not a one-time event.
But an ongoing practice of surrendering to what is.
Letting go of our attachments.
And allowing ourselves to be transformed by the present moment.
Beautifully put. And he even says that by practicing this kind of surrender.
This dying to the ego in everyday life.
We can actually prepare ourselves for the ultimate surrender.
Physical death.
Okay, so by becoming more comfortable with this process of letting go.
We can approach the transition of death with more peace and acceptance.
Exactly.
Is that why he calls it conscious death?
Yes. He suggests that if we haven't already encountered this dimension of the unmanifested in our lifetime,
That pure consciousness that exists beyond form.
we might miss the opportunity at the moment of physical death.
Because we're so attached to the physical realm.
To our identities that we can't see beyond that veil.
It's like our consciousness is so identified with form.
That it can't even conceive of a reality beyond form.
That's really deep.
It is.
So the way we live our lives now,
The way we relate to our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences.
it's actually shaping our experience of death as well.
It's all interconnected.
Wow, my mind is officially blown.
Mine too.
Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through the power of now.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what it means to be present.
To surrender and to embrace life fully.
That's wonderful to hear.
And for our listeners out there,
If you're feeling inspired to explore these ideas further,
I highly recommend picking up a copy of The Power of Now.
and maybe even starting a journaling practice,
Reflect on your own experiences with the egoic mind.
and the power of presence.
Great idea.
Until next time, may you find peace and presence in the power of now.